Hi, and welcome to the Law Center videocast. I'm Larry G. Marco, your host and founder of the Law Center, the largest network of the best trial lawyers in the country, and the founder of the Law Center YouTube channel, an online resource of free educational legal videos for self-represented litigants in child custody court. Go to the description portion of this video for more information. Today we have a special guest. We're here with John Davis, a former career prosecutor of sex crimes and author of several books about his work as a prosecutor. John, thank you for being a guest on the Law Center videocast.
It's my privilege to be here, Larry. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, it's our privilege to have you. Tell me, why were you passionate about your work as a prosecutor?
It's an acquired taste. I really took my first job as a prosecutor involuntarily. I just needed the work. And what I understood over 4 terms as a prosecutor was that being a prosecutor always gives you the option to do the right thing. That's your job, to do the right thing. And that really made the job a lot more bearable and incited my passion. I like to do the right thing.
Excellent. And you wrote several books from your time as a prosecutor. What was the main book or books that you wrote, and what are the key messages in each? I thought you had a top two, John. Start with How to Avoid False Allegations of Rape.
Well, let's do that. The false allegations of rape book really came as a result of observing the enormous discrimination against men in our legal system, especially in our criminal justice system. And a lot of that discrimination, it peaks out in sexual crimes. Many men are falsely convicted of sexual crimes. I saw that as a real problem in the system. And that problem comes from the British imperialism of the 19th century under Queen Victoria, which spread worship of women worldwide throughout the Western world, and spread also the fact that men are disposable under British culture.
John, I'll tell you what I hear when you say that, just for the benefit of our listeners, not to get too deep, but men are conditioned or men are taught to be disposable because, and a big reason, because they have to go die in war. They're
Sure.
taught disposability because they have to lay down their lives in war and to protect the country. Is that a fair assessment of that concept?
Yes, it is. That's the government view of men being disposable. In reality, what it is conscription, and the exploitation of men underlies the empowerment of atrocities committed by governments and politicians. Britain, for instance, all of its atrocities came from conscripting men over periods of hundreds of years and exploiting those men in the military to accomplish Britain's imperial objectives. And then that was true under Napoleon. It was true under many countries. And most of the wars in Europe resulted from the exploitation of men and conscription to back often irrational aggression by nations in Europe, especially Britain.
And perhaps also irrational orders on a military field to go charge a machine gun sitting behind bags of protection.
Absolutely. Last night on YouTube, I saw something about the charge of the Light Brigade. It was from a 1936 movie, and it was horrible what we did to men, what the British did to men especially, but all countries do to men. I've served in the military in 2 wars, and the abandonment of men because of their disposability is probably a war crime in itself, abandoning your own men, and we do that routinely when we get into wars. So, yes, that disposability of men carries over into our civilian culture, and part of that is the ease with which we accuse men of wrongdoing, especially in sex cases.
John, give me
But
an example of how you saw this as a prosecutor, how this would manifest itself in a prosecution's decision
Mhm.
to bring charges and maybe what gets lost in the application of the law, particularly regarding intent with sex crimes.
Well, let's take statutory rape. Statutory rape is viewed as a strict liability crime. It's not, but judges treat it as one. If you have sex with an underage person, then you are automatically guilty of serious criminal offense and any punishment that's applied to it. The difficulty with that view is that we now have something close to 15%, and I'm estimating these figures, about 15% of rape convictions are boys having consensual sex with underage girls, underage boys having consensual sex with underage girls. So that is a good illustration of how boys are considered disposable. I'll give you an example. When I was a prosecutor, I was prosecuting. I had a boy come across my desk. He was 15. He was being prosecuted for having sex with a girl. And I happened to have an extremely bright judge. And he said to me, "Has this girl been charged with statutory rape?" Almost mic drop. I said, "Well, Your Honor, as far as I know, she has not." He said, "Why not?" So I went back to the office and we had about a week of conferences and we decided, this judge is correct under the law. So we charged her. And all of a sudden, we stopped getting complaints about statutory rape. Because what statutory rape does is simply hold boys accountable for underage sex, or men. It rarely holds women accountable. And that's something that came out in one of the other books I wrote about female sex predators. Women commit more than half sex crimes, especially sex crimes against children, yet they're almost immune in our system. They're arresting teachers now, thankfully, female teachers, for raping boys. But they get into the courtroom and these foolish, ignorant judges say, well, the boy enjoyed it, so there's no punishment for him. Now, revert the gender. If a male teacher has sex with an underage girl, what are the judge's reactions?
They're going to lock him up and throw away the key.
Absolutely. So I saw this as a prosecutor, and where I could, I did what I could to address the inconsistencies. And it was an uphill battle when I was prosecuting sex assault cases because of that view that, well, men, it doesn't make any difference whether they get judged correctly or with due process or not. We're simply going to do this because we have to protect women.
So back to my initial question, can you tell us
Sure.
about how to avoid false accusations of rape? Can you give us some key takeaways from this, maybe 3 or 4 points, and can you give about a minute or two on each point, some strong points to take away on how to avoid a false accusation of rape?
Sure. There's 2 if you want to avoid false accusations of rape. 1, know who you're having sex with. Know something about her. One-night stands are extremely risky. You stand a chance of getting accused of raping someone who is alcoholically impaired. And judges and prosecutors will prosecute you simply to punish you for having sex. The person may not have been impaired. They don't care. They want to punish you for having sex. And that's common among judges and prosecutors. So get to know the person you're having sex with. Take a little time to get to know them and research their background. That's only intelligent. There's nothing wrong with that. Second, if you are with a woman who says she was sexually assaulted, do not have sex with her. And that's because she can, while having normal sex with you, have flashbacks and think that you were raping her when in fact that never occurred. So the important takeaway from that is you can't win if a woman says she's been sexually assaulted. If she's lying about having been sexually assaulted, you've got a really good chance she's going to falsely accuse you of rape, okay, or sexual assault. So don't have sex with a woman who says she's been sexually assaulted. It's not very common. Women will say all women are sexually assaulted. That's just not true. They claim that, and because there are many, many, many incentives for women to claim that they've been sexually assaulted in our culture. It's part of rape hysteria. and it's promulgated by the media, especially, as well as our institutions.
The second book I think that your writing focused on was about female predators and men being victims of rape. We had an off camera email exchange about that book. Tell me about what is the title of the book and give me three takeaways from that.
The book I had on that was Women Who Rape Men. The idea of rape developed over thousands of years, and it's a false stereotype. The idea was that women cannot sexually assault a man. Men can sexually assault women, and that all men are perverts. And it's only because we put a lot of men in jail. All men don't go around raping women. That's just not true. Most men, the biggest turnoff in the world would be having sex with a woman who does not want to have sex with the man. And that makes very, very few rapists. We have incredibly ignorant notions about rape in our country, and it's part of the rape hysteria we inherited from Britain. That idea that there are tens of thousands, millions of rapes occurring every year is pure nonsense. Yes, it does occur, and it is a very awful crime, but it is quite rare. And most men are not rapists. They are the exact opposite of rapists. They care and love the woman that they are sharing sex with.
What I want to focus you on, John, is men, how a man can get injured from a rape or the harm that happens to a man. Tell us about that. It's harmful for a man, especially a young man, to get raped by a woman in a position of power. Talk about that.
Absolutely. What happens to young boys is it freezes their psychosexual development. They're frozen at the age at which the experience occurs. So if a woman rapes a boy at age 11 or 12, that boy's frozen in terms of being able to develop social skills, bonding skills. Sometimes, in some cases, if it's associated with adrenaline, the woman's rape of the boy, then it can freeze their reading, writing, and arithmetic skills at the age at which the rape occurred. So these boys have to go through life with 11, 12-year-old skills. Very few people can do that. We live in an extremely complex society, and if those boys cannot mature because of the rape beyond the age of 11 or 12, they are often forced into social isolation, become chronically depressed, they're under enormous stress, sometimes crushing anxiety, and they suicide. It can be that damaging.
The first part of that, you focus on young children before the age of 12. Let's talk about someone older, let's say an adult, because it seems shocking because men are so much physically stronger. How can a man stronger be overpowered by a woman who is less physically imposing? And don't men actually enjoy sex? Where does that injury come from?
Well, men often are afraid of resisting a woman for many reasons. One, they're afraid of pissing her off and having her accuse him of the rape. If you're in an intimate situation, your DNA is all over her. You're not going to be able to deny the fact that you had some form of sexual contact. For that reason alone, men usually don't report rape because they're admitting sexual contact, and if she chooses to lie. Another thing is physical force. Women don't use physical force. They can, for instance, using a weapon. There are cases out there of women holding a knife to the man's throat. Case in Colorado where the woman tied him up under pretense of BDSM sex and then cut him numerous times and raped him. So that does occur, but typically women will use drugs, drug men, alcohol. They will use threats. For instance, we're going to have sex, or I'll tell the police, they'll never believe you. If you say that you didn't try to rape me, things like that. You either have sex with me or I will say that you raped me. So you have drugging, alcohol, you have threats, you have psychological manipulation. Now, when he realizes that happens, it's extremely damaging to the man. It creates an enormous amount of trauma. And we're talking about grown men, and grown men are trained to just stuff it down and ignore it. And if a man tries to get help from, forget it. None of them are trained to help men. So he will often go into a long period, sometimes years, of severe stress, anxiety, chronic depression. And that chronic depression and stress over time is what causes men to suicide. Men can suicide and have no idea that the woman raping him was what the cause of it was, because it will often happen years later.
So thank you for that. So I want to get to our next point, what
Mhm.
precipitated this interview. There's a news article about the Olympic hockey players in Canada who were accused of sexual assault of a single woman. And I also want to read some of the key facts that I synthesized for the ease of this interview. So the facts are that a woman had consensual sex with one hockey player before that hockey player allegedly invited via a group chat other members, 10 other hockey players who then came into the room. She was drunk, felt pressured and surprised and unable to object to sex with other players, several other players. Prosecutors say she complained, and this is as it was reported. Prosecutors say that she complied to have sex out of fear and confusion, not general consent. And then the article emphasized there was no verbal refusal or physical resistance, but there was also a lack of affirmative consent. So, assuming with the next part of this interview, because we're only going from an article, we didn't review any transcript. There were witnesses that are going to testify, including a police officer. But what I want to ask you is what your take as an expert from all your experience, what are the key issues of the case, particularly the intent of the hockey players?
Let's start with, I clerked for the Supreme Court, and sometimes we were allowed to marshal the oral arguments. I would sit and listen to all the attorneys and the judges' questionings and everything. And then I'd get home about 9 or 10 at night, turn on the news, and I'd listen to the news, and I couldn't believe they were talking about the same case. You were quite astute in pointing out that we don't know the realities of this case, and we're getting it from the news, from reading the news account. She felt intimidated and feared. That's irrelevant, for one thing. The men have to know she was intimidated. My guess is you're going to get testimony at trial from the defense that she was seductive, sexually aggressive, smiling, happy, enjoying herself. This sounds like she told somebody about the experience. From the account in the newspaper, even, she was conscious. They said she had 8 drinks. Let me tell you something. As a prosecutor, 8 drinks is nothing for an alcoholic. I've seen alcoholic blood concentrations 5 times the legal limit, and you wouldn't even know the alcoholic had been drinking because they develop a tolerance to it. If she slammed down 8 drinks, my guess is she's an alcoholic, and it was slightly impairing her, if at all. What alcohol does tend to do to alcoholics is free up their inhibitions.
So I do want to go back to the original initial premise. Let's assume that the testimony comes out in a similar fashion, that she does testify that, yes, I was sexy, I was teasing, I was provocative with the one man. And then when the others came in, I was more scared and overwhelmed. So let's say at least that that's her state of mind, and that let's accept her prosecution's presentation is true. Where are we there?
Well, you still don't have a rape case. Rape, even under British laws. See, Canada is one of British colonies, and it's obsessed with rape hysteria like Britain itself. Even under British law, the men must have known that she did not consent, period. There's no such thing as affirmative consent. Okay. The focus is not what she was thinking or feeling, it's what they knew about her state of consent. Okay. If they didn't know she was in any way afraid or hesitant, there's no rape, period. Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that in some, if not most jurisdictions, that can't be patently unreasonable, the lack of consent or otherwise.
Correct. So let's say,
For instance, reckless, they can't be reckless about disregarding, overlooking what her intent is. There is some standard that that they're held to.
well, what the prosecutors are saying here is that the men should have known. It doesn't look to me like 10 men had sex with her. I think
So
two or
they were
three
in the
did.
room,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But there was
Well,
others.
yeah, but what they're saying is if you have 10 guys in a room and a woman is asking for sex, you shouldn't believe her. That's what they're saying. And it's a crime to believe her if she asked for sex.
Well,
Okay.
again, let's not impose. That's not of the record that she asked. I think the point is that they thought that she was willing and a consensual partner. She is stating that they didn't care, that she actually felt uncomfortable and didn't want to, as the prosecution presented it, as the story was reported.
What she felt uncomfortable and did not express that to them. There's no rape, period. Okay. It's not, you'll hear, oh, they let him off because she didn't fight enough. Baloney. Fighting is one way of expressing your lack of consent. Saying no, simply saying no, is another way of expressing your lack of consent. Okay. But if you're smiling and flirtatious and kissing a man back, okay, how is that man possibly to know that you don't consent? So let's wait until the defense starts testifying. The defense starts calling witnesses. My guess is only one or two of these men are being accused.
I
I
think it's
think.
four. I don't know the exact number, but it's a handful. It's not just one, and it's not all 10. So
And I think, we should wait until the defense puts on their case.
very good. So how can our viewers and listeners learn more about you and follow your social media online?
I had tens of thousands of followers on Facebook, but I abandoned Facebook. It's impossible to have adult discussions on Facebook. I'm on Twitter or X, and just look up Gender Studies for Men, and you'll see John Davis there next to that. So Gender Studies for Men on X, best way to keep up with these things. And I will be there. I usually post 15, 20 tweets a day on relevant issues, many of them focusing on sex crimes and sex cases because they're very prominent in the media.
Great. And tell us about some of the other books, or do you have an online
Well,
store or a website?
yeah, so look up John Davis, and my degree titles are after my name. That's how I put myself on as an author to make myself easy to find. But look up how to avoid false accusations of rape, and then click on the author's name, which is my name, and it'll give you a list of all my books. So
The viewers can also go to the description portion of the video where I have put all the links that John has shared with me so you can follow him online. That was just for the people who are listening and don't have access to their computer as they're following this. So that's all we have time for, but I want to thank you for being a guest on the Law Center videocast.
it's been my pleasure and my privilege, Larry. Hope we get a chance to do it again.
I as well. We've been here with John Davis, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, comment, and also click the notification bell to subscribe to be alerted of new videos. This has been brought to you by the Law Center, the largest network of the best trial lawyers in the United States. Go to the description portion of this video where you can learn more about John Davis and his books, and also the Law Center Network and the Family Court Custody Boot Camp. Signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.